Welcome to episode 1347 of The Sleeper on the Bus. I am Justin Mason, joined as always on Sundays by Jason Collette. Season is over. We made it through, 6 months of pain and tireless work. We sweated, we enjoyed it, we loved it. But I don't know if you're like me, but I am so glad it is over.
Justin, I cannot tell you the sense of relief that I had a week ago Sunday where I was like, I don't have to do a free agent bid. I don't have to set a lineup. I mean, it's a grind all season long. It's a grind. And I'm just a sense of relief that the fantasy season was over, particularly because in middle of August, I had two teams in first place. I did not win either of those leagues. And so relief, frustration, a lot of different emotions. I just finished my annual accountability review on my hitting and pitching bold predictions, which had some great ones and had some pretty big misses too, but that's the fun of bold predictions. And then today we're going to talk about how some of our teams did to add to my level of frustration. But if you're on video, you see what I have right here above my finger? My old license plate, my old never bunt. I found it cleaning out the garage and I've put it here just as a reminder.
Well,
yes,
that's
I'm
good.
putting that
That's
right
a good
there.
victory for the season right there.
Yes, I'm putting that right there. And then just above it's a picture I got for my birthday, which is one of the reasons we didn't record lately, of the Bojangles Coliseum, where the Charlotte Checkers play hockey, and that's what that's a picture of. So as the local artist in Charlotte, David French, does a lot of these different, and that's Night Truist Field, and so a lot of different things. But yeah, so let's have some accountability discussion today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a number of our leagues, our main industry leagues. I'm sure Paul and I will have discussions about maybe some of my high stakes leagues here over the course of the next week. And then we'll start going kind of position by position in terms of kind of talking about individual player performances on the season and kind of how we fared in terms of our predictions in those. But I wanted to sit down. We're going to talk about tout. We're going to talk about labor. We're going to talk about TGFBI being the big three industry leagues that we're kind of all a part of. For those wondering, I had a massive sweat on Monday. It turned out really, really well for me. But we'll talk about that again. I'll talk about that with Paul a little bit more here in the future. Before we jump into that, I want to talk about a couple things, though. First, let's talk about Joe Musgrove. He is going to be getting Tommy John. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just shaking my. It's just so unfortunate. Just
yeah. It is unfortunate. At the same time, this is something I talked about kind of coming into the season, that I was really concerned about drafting him because he dealt with real elbow issues towards the end of last season. Somehow, he didn't pitch a full season, but somehow he made it through the entirety of the regular season before the issues really damaged him. But he's going to be out all of next season. And then potentially part of 2026. Is this kind of the end of Joe Musgrove's major relevance in fantasy baseball?
I mean, looking at the numbers, he threw 181 innings, almost identical 181 in 2021, 2022. And then the last 2 years failed to reach 100 innings in each of those last 2 years. So you add that recency factor along with the injury. And the crazy thing about it was, Musgrove wanted to stay in that game. Higashioka noticed something, was like, well, wait a second, something's wrong. And he was trying to stay. I don't know if it would have been just one more pitch and it would have been that's not good. But, so we know, how many times have we said it on this podcast? Recovery is 18 months. Yeah. I personally don't want to touch anybody until they're 2 full years, but perhaps I may need to revisit that because of some of the internal brace stuff that's happening now. I mean, Justin's going to have a link in the show notes. Dr. Chris Ahmad has written a couple of pieces lately on what they're calling TJ3, which is doing the graft replacement and the internal brace. So Drew Rasmussen had that and he came back and looked pretty good this year. And so maybe that I need to adjust that timeline on my own. And maybe as an industry, we need to adjust that 18-month timeline if the internal brace is indeed accelerating that recovery for these pitchers. So it's now, instead of 12 to 18 months, it's 9 to 12 months. I don't think in our recent in the next few years, we're ever going to see it get below 9 months. I just don't know how the human body, even in these elite athletes, is going to be able to adjust and heal that quickly. But the fact that it would be great, given the prevalence of these injuries and that they're not going to go away anytime soon, that if these guys don't miss more than a calendar year in pitching, because it sucks when these guys are gone as long as they have been. And then even then, some of them just don't make it back. Even the regular Tommy John surgery, the return, it's like 88% successful. I was looking back at bold predictions, and I made the comment about Colby White with the Rays. Before he went down with TJ, was one of the most dominant relievers in the minor leagues. And he can't throw a strike these days. And his surgery is 2+ years in the rearview mirror, and he can't throw a strike anymore. So you don't know what's going to happen on the other side of these surgeries. Often we get spoiled, and we're like, "Oh, these guys they'll be fine. They'll come back throwing better than they ever were before." Musgrove, you just don't draft him next year, even if end round $1. If you're in a keeper league, okay, maybe you get the $1 2026 season, and then maybe you have to extend them and get that $6 2027 season. I can't argue against doing that if you want, but that's just a roster spot you're gonna have to stare at all year.
And I mean, he's 31, Musgrove is, and he's going to be 32 at the end of this year. So by the time he gets back, we're talking about a guy who's potentially 33, 34 years old, coming off of Tommy John. We all know, just how much pitchers can struggle. We saw it with Robbie Ray right this year, that, pitchers often struggle with command and control in their time back. And Musgrove is a lot of command and control. So a guy like him struggling with that on his way back, this may be 2027 before he's usable in fantasy again. And at that point, he's 33, 34 years old. So I think this is at least going to be a long road. That link to the article will be in the show notes. So if you want to go see it, and it's from Dr. Christopher Ahmad. And for those who don't know who that is, he is the head team physician for the New York Yankees. He has been since 2000, or he's been on staff there since 2008, been the lead physician since 2009. So it's a reputable source. He has 3 different articles recently over the course of the last week, kind of on this Tommy John, this kind of new internal brace Tommy John surgery. So if you're looking for more information on that, definitely recommend going and reading what he's written. Let's kind of pivot over, and you've been tracking stolen bases and other statistics kind of all over the year, kind of comparing them to last season. And so you put together a nice little table, which I will attach into the show notes as well. That kind of covers every major stat you really need for looking at kind of what's changed in baseball over the course of 2024 from 2023, including things like stolen bases, which were up 3.1%. When you look at this kind of this table that you made, what was the thing that kind of stuck out to you the most?
So for those of you guys watching video, I'm actually going to share screen. I want to show this. So if you're sharing, so here we are. And so let's make this, let's embiggen this a little bit so we can see some stuff. And here we are. So what really stood out to me was right here, home runs. Home runs were down 7.1% over the course of the year. And then if we look at home run to fly ball ratio, it was down almost 9%. And we talked about this all year. The ball just did not travel like it had in 2023. What we don't know is the why behind that. We don't know. What we do know is that all 30 ballparks use humidors. And they're all supposed to have the same level of pregame storage beforehand. But all of us that watch baseball this year, we saw the ball just behaving differently. It was behaving more like 2022 than it did 2024. This table, if you're only consuming this on audio, I'm only showing 2023 over 2024. But the key thing is the only statistic that got better, the only 2 statistics. Steals, as you said, Justin, went up 3.1%. But strikeout rate, the league actually made more contact this year. We have not seen the league every year. The strikeout rates tend to get a little worse. And this year it went from 22.7 to 22.6 and 0.4% improvement. who cares, right? But no, that's actually a big deal because it's gotten a lot worse over recent years. And the fact that they curbed that a little bit is good. And, one of the other things that stood out to me was the league-wide batting average fell to 243. I mean, we were told that with shifts not in play and all this, league-wide batting average should be a lot better. Well, it hasn't been. And I could probably draw a direct line, and I would like to see a statistician or a data analyst do a little more with this. But those home runs that weren't home runs that became fly ball outs is probably the direct correlation to that 5-point drop in batting average, because fly balls have the lowest % chance of becoming a base hit. And we saw a lot more fly balls that did not make it over the wall this year than we saw. I mean, just the home run total went from 58.68 to 54.49. That's a 400 drop in home run. So, let's assume 10 of those 400 fell for a base hit in some capacity, but that's kind of the trickle down effect. It was a lower run environment this year. For those of you guys going to First Pitch Arizona, I'm doing a panel with Joe Arrico and Ray Murphy on this topic. So you'll get to hear more about what I have to say on that and what those two folks have to say about that as well. And finally, I think the violations, we're getting used to it. Batter violations went down 54%. Pitcher violations on pitch clocks went down almost 40%. So the league's adjusting in that regard, but this was an offensive environment that we didn't know it was coming. After we saw growth from 2022 to 2023, and then we went backwards this year. And I don't know about you, Justin, but on my teams, a lot of that is reflected in my teams. I'm thinking, okay, I've got enough power here, and anywhere where I didn't have enough power really got magnified. And it was tough to chase it all year long because it just wasn't a lot out there for that. And so the places I really struggled this year was offense. Pitching, for the most part, I did extremely well across the league in pitching. It's just offensively, if you drafted, even leagues where I tried to draft more offense, it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, and this is a really good transition into kind of our next topic, because I'm going to talk a lot about the lack of power in some of my teams, especially the first two we're going to talk about in Tout and Labor. But I feel like, I feel exactly the same way you did, which is the power was down. And if you didn't prioritize that early, it was very, very difficult to find it later off the wire this year. I'm going to be starting my kind of redemption, or not my redemption, but my apology tour, though there'll be some redemption pieces in there as well, tonight. And hopefully the first few ones will be up this week on the site. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very, very big topic. And it's also going to be a very frustrating topic, because as we've seen over the course of the last few years, Major League Baseball has no problem kind of just changing the ball, right? And changing
and not telling anybody.
And not telling anybody before they do it. And so while we want to definitely kind of adjust our strategies for 2025, we don't know how much we should adjust those strategies, because who knows what Major League Baseball is going to do to potentially increase the run environment. One interesting thing I kind of see with that table is, like you said, the strikeouts were up, but swinging strike rate across the league wasn't really. It was 11.1% swinging strike rate on average this season, and last year was 11.2. So it actually went down a little bit while strikeouts went up a little bit. So the one thing I do kind of notice in the kind of the league-wide trends is just the amount of aggressiveness by hitters. And so I think this is definitely a really, really interesting topic that I'm hoping somebody other than me dives into, because I don't know that I'm going to have the time. I really appreciate that. And like I said, I will link that into the show notes, so that way people can check out that table at their convenience. All right, let's move over and talk about our leagues right now. Let's start with Tout Wars. You were in the AL Tout Wars League. You finished 10th. I was in the mixed auction. I finished 8th. Let's start with you. 10th is, it's not the bottom of the barrel, but it's kind of close, because that is a 12-man league.
Yep.
What went wrong?
A lot. So a couple of things with tout. Let's not forget an AL tout. It is OBP. If you finish below 60 points, you lose $10 off FAB for every point. So there comes to be a point in the season where you're like, okay, if I can't win it, let me just stay above 60. And that's what I was able to do last year. I was not able to do that this year, nor was Jeff Erickson or Howard Bender, who finished just below me with that. But this was the league. This was the weird one for me because, like I said, I did well in pitching everywhere except for here. I was dead last in ERA. I was dead last in WHIP, and I was dead last in saves. And I, for the life of me, can't explain that because my pitching was good to incredible everywhere else. I tried to make different things. Wins were a absolute. We'll get into more of that for labor, but pitching is what went terribly wrong for me in this league, and I was not able to dig out of that mess. Didn't matter what I tried all year. It's like I had Lucas Urseg at one point, and then he wasn't doing anything, and so I moved off from him. So I got one save from Lucas Urseg, not the ones he got everywhere else. I'm looking through. Jordan Romano was one of my closers. That obviously didn't go well. Luis Castillo was my biggest pitcher that I invested in. That did not play out as well either. And I took a shot in Jose Leclerc being the closer. That didn't play out. And it just, that's it. I'm looking at it and I can see why we had struggles. One of the only success stories I had there was, getting Cade Smith week 1. And that helped keep my ratios from being any worse than they were. But pitching was just a hole I could not get out of all year long. I mean, I had a decent amount of offense for me because that's always been a struggle in tout. But pitching wise, yikes! I need to rebound. I did put an effort into drafting more offense this year in tout, but the pitching just didn't do it. And I got to look back at that one. Because I am once again disappointed in where I finished in tout. Maybe I need to get out of AL and just get some variety because I don't have an NL league, and maybe that's part of my issue as well. I don't know, but I have finished as high as second in this league, but I've had more second division finishes than upper division finishes.
Yeah, if you do decide to get out of AL, let me know because maybe I'll jump in because I haven't had a mono league here in a few years, and I do kind of miss them. And NL is a little bit more difficult for me being on Sunday, but so my tout league, I finished 8th, which in a 15-team league, it's right in the middle of the pack. It's not super. Not embarrassing, but it's also not it's not super intriguing either way. I will say though, that the difference between 8th and 4th is 4 points.
Oh, that's not bad.
And I was in 3rd or 2nd much of the season. And then my team just kind of shit the bed in the last few weeks of the season. And that's why I plummeted all the way down to 8th. But my issues, and like I said, I will do a deeper dive on this team specifically, probably tonight for the site for tomorrow, because it's a really interesting team in kind of the grand scheme of things. Because I finished, and I'm laughing at these standings, and I apologize for that. So I had only 5 points out of 15 in home runs, right? Home runs was the bane of my existence, but I had 13 points in runs. I had 12 points in RBIs. It just was a team built, and somewhat purposefully to have guys who were just going to get a lot of plate appearances. I really focused on trying to get guys who got a lot of plate appearances. And it kind of worked for the most part. We'll talk about the big mistake here in a second, but because I did do really, really well in runs and RBIs, right? 2 stats that are pretty well keyed into plate appearances. But I put together a team of guys who weren't prodigious power guys, right? Vinny Pascantino, Brandon Donovan, Anthony Volpe took a step back in power. Xander Bogaerts struggled. Randy Rosarena, right? I really thought this was going to be a good year for Dalton Varsho.
Oh,
Nathaniel Lowe was, on this team. There were some pretty good wins, right? I had Jaron Duran for $8. Like that was, a really nice win. Colt Keith in the reserve rounds. But one of the big issues that is going to be a common theme between this team and the next team we're going to talk about, which is Labor for me, is I spent $61 on a Ronald Acuna. And that was brutal. Because while Tout Wars has, and I believe Labor has this rule, though I didn't use it in Labor because I didn't realize. Tout Wars has a fantastic rule. It's one of my favorite industry league rules, one of my favorite fantasy baseball rules. I think every league should have this, especially if you're doing an auction. If you get a player, you buy a player at auction, and that player gets injured and you are forced to drop that player, you get redeemed back, fab money. So in Tout, it is 10 times. So when I was able to, drop Acuna because he was out for the season, I got $600 in fab back. Now, and I was able to trade, $210 in fab for Wyatt Langford, which was, wasn't amazing, but it was somewhat helpful, especially in that kind of deep of a league. And I was able to have the most amount of fab almost all year. The problem was losing a guy like Acuna just is so hard to overcome, especially when I needed the power that he provided. So I just wasn't able to kind of keep up. And we also were in a situation where Scott Swaine, he kind of ran away with the league. He was in first place almost all year long. And by the time we got to like mid-August, he had a 20-point lead on me and the rest of the field, and just kind of ran away with it. So
love that for him, considering what that 1 year where he had left all the money on the table and went through that whole process to, a couple of years later here, be able to do that. Awesome.
Yeah. He had just a phenomenal year. Congratulations to him. Well-deserved victory. So that's Tout Wars. Let's move on over to Labor. I'll go first this time because it does kind of pair together.
I wanted to bring something up with Labor there real quick. The difference, like the rebate, the fab rebate process. In Labor, it's a little different. You do get dollar-to-dollar rebate because it's $100 fab and you get dollar-to-dollar, but only up until the All-Star break. After that, you're done. Yeah, if you lose, like last year, I forgot who I had. I had somebody come down with a season-ending injury the week after the All-Star break. I got $0 for him. Okay. If it would have happened before the All-Star break, I would have had $25 back in fab. So it's a little different. After the break, you lose them, you lose them. So you're incentivized. Like I was able to rebate Anthony Rendon. Couple. I'll get to my team, but that's the key differentiator. Both leagues have it, but in Labor, after the All-Star break, you're out of luck.
Well, and that brings up a really, really good point that we talk about, I think, a fair amount on this show. And we also talk about just because we play these games, a little bit more competitively than a lot of people, and that ostensibly this is partly our jobs, right? Like this is Paul's full-time job, and you and I do this kind of part-time, alongside of our regular full-time jobs. But what is the number one rule of fantasy?
Know your league rules.
Know your league rules. And Justin did not know his league rules in Labor. He did not know that he got a redemption in Labor. And so when he spent $60 on Ronald Acuna Jr. In Labor, he did not redeem him. And this is a massive mistake for me, right? Because the amount of money in fab I could have gotten back for Ronald Acuna Jr. would have been massive in Labor, because Labor is $100 worth of fab for the year, no $0 bids.
Correct.
And by mid-season, I was hurting in fab. Like I was hurting a lot. I also really struggled with website. And again, this is my fault that I didn't ask more questions. And I'm going to be real honest, and this is going to be a really difficult article for me to write. So the main industry leagues that we have nowadays are Tout, Labor, TGFBI, and the Earth leagues, right? I'm in all four. I run two of the four. Uh, so, however, so two of them, TGFBI and Earth, are on NFBC.
Yeah,
I've been Tout Wars for a very long time at this point. It's run on Roto, which isn't anybody's favorite site. So, and then Labor is on RT Sports. Again, I don't know if that's anybody else's favorite site. Now I know
it's got some ups and downs. There
yes.
are some things I really enjoy about RT Sports.
So I'm kind of pitter-pattering around the embarrassing part of this, which is I kind of forgot about Labor at the start of the season. And I didn't make any moves, including roster, like just lineup moves, or I didn't make any, pickups for like the first 6 weeks of the season. And had I done that, I would have won this league. I finished in third. With 2 weeks to go in the season, I was in first place. It was a battle between Gray Alberg, who won the league, and Ariel Cohen, who ended up finishing 1 point ahead of me.
God, so it's your fault Gray won that league?
I'm so embarrassed by this because I am like I'm really, really vigilant about my leagues, right? We're gonna, we'll talk about TGFBI here in a minute, but like when Paul and I do deep dive into kind of some of our other leagues, including our high stakes leagues, like I've worked really, really hard in those leagues all year long, and I messed up. Like I just kind of forgot about Labor because it was on this, site that I just never really used before. So I had, beginning of the season, I had Kyle Bradish in my lineup, and I had other injured guys in my lineup, and I wasn't making fab pickups. And then all of a sudden, I kind of went, oh no, I haven't been doing anything in Labor. And so I went over to, the RT Sports, and I made sure I set my lineups. And I was able to pull myself in a 12-team league, from ninth place, to first place, by August. And then I held first place down for a month. Team kind of fell apart a little bit at the end, and Gray ended up catching me. But this is just one of those reminders. One, know your team's rules, and two, you got to work. If you don't do the work, nothing's going to happen.
Yep.
So
and that's the challenge there, like you outlined. You're using multiple sites to get all this done. I would say, like, one of the things I enjoy your RotoWire, you can import your leagues into the league finder, and you can use, and it just reminds you like, hey, I'm gonna go to a league, and you can see all your leagues. And so it allows you to do that. But it's still, as I think through my leagues this year, I was on Roto for XFL and Tout. I was on RT Sports for Labor. I was on CBS for 3 home leagues. I was on NFBC for 6 leagues. Am I leaving anything out? No, I think that's it. But it's like 4 different sites, 4 different processes. And it's almost like you got to keep a second, like, Google sheet and try to keep track of this is what I got to do. This is how I got to do things. I mean, the league software tool really helps to be able to look at it and say, okay, I need, here are the best available free agent guys without having to search through some stuff. So it gives you that, and you can search by who have the best projections for this particular scoring period for a certain range for the rest of the season. And so you're able to do that, but that's about the only way. But even then it was a struggle to keep up with my teams this year.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, like, this is something you and I talked about before we got on air, which was like, hey, like, I got too many leagues. Like, I mean, and I love playing in a lot of leagues. I think playing in a lot of leagues actually helps me as a drafter. I don't know that it helps me as a player. And so it's something I'm definitely going to have to look at, because I mean, I had 19 leagues this year. And that doesn't include Dynasty, Keeper, or our listener leagues, right? And so, like, when you add in all those, like, I'm probably in 23, 24 leagues this year. And that's over, like, don't know, 6 sites on Roto, RT Sports, NFBC, ESPN, CBS, and Yahoo, and Fantrax. So 7 sites. And it was clearly too much for me. And so there's definitely going to be some paring down of leagues for me, especially in the fab department, because of those kind of 19 that I initially kind of talked about. 11 of them were fab leagues, and that that makes for a disastrous Sunday. So there will definitely be some changes in the portfolio of my leagues, because I was actually really, really stoked when I thought I was going to win Labor this year. It was my first year.
So was I.
It was my first year in Labor. And in spite of the fact that the first 6 weeks of the season or so, and I'll do the exact math on that for the article, I wasn't paying attention, and somehow I still I drafted a good enough team and I made good enough moves in season that all of a sudden I was in a really, really good position to win that league. It didn't work out, but it's all my fault, right? Like, it's not like I can't go well, my team fell apart, there's nothing I could do. I know for a fact, if I had been paying attention for the first 6 weeks of the season in that league, I would have won. So tell me about your Labor experience.
All right. So my Labor experience, it's time to screen share again. So I want to do that because there's a couple things I want to talk about. So I could look back at a couple of things. I took a chance on Anthony Rendon and Trevor Story. That didn't pan out at all. I was able to at least rebate both those guys. So I had $21 that I was able to get back, but that's, that didn't help. I struggled offensively in this league. Anthony Rizzo was another one. So there was a theme, and I even wrote about it, and I was able to rebate Rizzo, but it was a theme. I was taking chances on bounce backs, and those failed. You mentioned Dalton Varsho, and I groaned. Varsho was also somebody I had in this team. But, Kerry Carpenter missing a chunk of time, but did well when he played, was great. Anthony Santander having a career year. Giancarlo Stanton mostly staying healthy and having a career year. That helped. These were all good things. Ultimately, the killer part in this league was, I'm going to go back to standings. And so I need to share this tab. So this is one of the things I do like about RT Sports. It has this graph so you can look where you're at. So this was my team throughout the year. Remember, I won this league last year. And in AL Labor, unless your name is Glenn Colton or Rick Wolf, there's never been a repeat champion in AL Labor. Those guys have done it twice. And that's it. Nobody else has ever done it. And so that was the challenge I had coming into the league. But, here I am, and the team was competitive all year. And then in the summer, it got extremely hot. And so here we are in scoring period 21. I'm at 93.5. I'm feeling good. I'm like, holy crap. I'm going to join Rick and Glenn, and I'm going to be a repeat champ. And then I'm going to bring in James Anderson. So James Anderson was 8.5 points behind me. Then I lost 1.5 points, and he fell. So in scoring period 22, I was at 91.5, and he was at 78.5. James finished at 95.5, and I finished at 82.5. James's team was in first place for a majority of the year, had a bit of a slump, and then just went, just took off. Just absolutely took off. My mind absolutely fell apart. And even with some of the injuries, this wouldn't have mattered. I even wrote about it. I wrote about it right about here. And I was like, I've got this big lead, and I can't tell you how uncomfortable it makes me, because I'm looking at all the different scenarios, and he's winning this league. I basically concluded it. I'd rather be in James's shoes than mine right now. And that's exactly how this played out. Now, where it killed me, and I still, for the life, I would love to hear from somebody else, because misery loves company. Have you ever seen a team finish first and second in every pitching category, but finish 10th in wins?
I have.
I had the strikeouts, so it's not like I had a bunch of relievers. Like, I had the strikeouts, I had the saves, I had the ERA, I had the WHIP, and I finished third. And like I'm saying, it wasn't even close. 66 wins, and there was 58 and 56 below me, but I could not get out of this hole all year long. I could get up a little bit, but at the end of the day, I was right back to where I started. And this hurt. This would have if you look at all these, any other team, it's like, James he finished second in wins, and he was competitive. And then we have, last, but it just, I blame you, Nick Pavetta. You're killing me here. But I had all of these other points, all of this greatness, and then I just could not get wins. Could not get them. It would have made it closer. But you can see, and this is the other feature I love about RT Sports, is I can see exactly where my team sat. But you can see where things were close. Stolen bases were really close all year. Home runs were really close all year. RBI is bad. Like, you can see where things are with this. I traded away a closer because I didn't need him. I was making efforts, but James ran away with the league at the end. So I did not repeat. I feel good about finishing second, but I'm also extremely frustrated about finishing second because it's a lot better than tout. But at the same point, it's like I had it there, and then everything just started going the wrong direction on me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Because, like you said, no $0 bids, and there was a couple guys towards the end where it's like, and remember, you can't bench in labor. So you're carrying a guy or you're cutting him. The only reason you can bench him is if he gets sent to the minors or if he's out on the IL. Then you can get rid of these guys. But I had to carry some of these guys. And Brady Singer and Taj Bradley were a huge part of that surge, and they were also a big part of that dump. But I couldn't dump them because I didn't have anybody else. My bench all of my bench was hurt. You're allowed to draft 6 guys, and you can move those. All of my bench got hurt, and then ran out of fab with 3 weeks to go. So I was just, that's it. I got to run this team the way it is.
Yeah, and I put up my graph as well, and as you can see, I'm the orange. I just put up mine with Ariel's and Gray's since we finished 1, 2, 3. And if you look at the start of my season, it's pretty low and in the dumps, and then all of a sudden things turn around.
And almost the same time, that week 17, yeah. Like you and I were like both living the dream, and then
all of a sudden. So I will not make that mistake again in labor if I'm invited back. I hope to be invited back. So we'll see how that all works out. All right, let's finish off with TGFBI. If those of you who are interested in the Earth Leagues, I'm sure I will be covering them with Dave McDonald, who helps me kind of run those leagues. Here over the course of the next few weeks as we get back to our recording schedule in the off season as well. I finished 4th in TGFBI. You finished 12th. What went wrong in TGFBI for you?
Everything. So this gets back to too many fab leagues. And so I looked at it. I made this. I told you this offline. It's like if TGFBI had a draft and hold format, I would be all in on that. But I've already cut one league this winter, and TGFBI is on the chopping block only because I have to cut back. And I don't have 24 leagues like you do. But I've got to cut back. And so I'm waffling on, but I love the draft. Love draft season. I'm not cutting Wharf. I love Wharf. That's a live draft too. A bunch of great dudes. And we got together in Atlanta area. And so don't want to cut Wharf. It's fun to have that in-season talk. And we even got somebody was in my local fantasy football league too that I did. So I was like, cool. So that was that part of it. But a lot of stuff I just could not. Some of the same themes. I just couldn't get it. I can't pull up the standings to go back and look through. But I'd look at like Ezekiel Tovar, awesome. That worked out really well. Kerry Carpenter again. MJ Melendez, no. Santander, yes. George Springer, no. Alex Bregman, it took a while for that one to get going. So a lot of those different pieces. Yeah, the pitching was a lot better, but offensively, I could not get it together offensively in TGFBI. And I tried. I've said this in previous episodes. Just because I finished 12th doesn't mean I mailed it in. I was trying every single week. You go back and look, I was making transactions all the way into week 26. I was setting my lineup. I was making fab bids. I was doing everything I possibly could to do something in the standings with this team, whether it was disrupt somebody else or do something. Just didn't work.
Yeah. And that's going to happen sometimes. If we look at a lot of my draft champions leagues from 2024, just there was not much I could have done. It just wasn't a good enough draft to get me through. In my TGFBI league, I feel like I said, I finished fourth. I was in second and third much of the season, and as the season kind of wore on, it was pretty clear that Ben Pernick was going to win this league. He was absolutely destroying everybody. He put together a starting rotation that was pretty formidable. But one of the things I will say about Ben's team is if you look at his draft, there's nothing in it that you go, oh, this is a monster team. Ben did a lot of really, really good fab work throughout the season to kind of just propel him. Yeah, I mean, getting Logan Gilbert in the 6th round and getting Sonny Gray in the 8th round were nice additions. And Seth Lugo in the 18th round. There's a reason why his pitching was really, really good. But I mean, he also drafted Joel Garcia in the 4th round and Mike Trout in the 5th round. Neither of those guys panned out to the level that you would have liked. He fabbed really, really well. And so Big shout out to Ben Pernick, who was just fantastic.
I totally forgot about that. This was the league I had 1-1 and drafted Acuna. This was the one.
Oh, well, there you go.
David Bednar in the 4th round. Yeah, that sucked. I had Logan Gilbert in the 5th. Let's see, Bo Naylor and Alejandro Kirk as my catchers, just 2 giant whiffs. Eduardo Rodriguez, yikes. Christopher Sanchez worked out well. I did not. So I go back and look. I didn't really draft well. Although getting Jack Flaherty in 25th round was nice, but taking Moncada in 26th, what are you doing? Florial, I did not draft well. Looking back at this now that when you mentioned that, I'm like, oh, maybe look at the draft. All right, losing Acuna, that doesn't help, but I made a lot of I made some mistakes.
I mean, I think the glaring weakness in my draft is batting average. And it bears out, obviously, in the standings where I was last place in batting average and not even particularly close to 14th place in batting average. And I mean, it is a compiling of guys that either disappointed or I knew wasn't going to give me very good batting average. Lindor, would have liked to see a little bit better batting average from him. But Nico Horner, he disappointed this year in the batting average department. Jake Berger's obviously going to drain your batting average. Willie Adames is going to help your batting average. Dalton Varsho, obviously going to drain your batting average. MJ Melendez is going to drain your batting average. Even like some of my hits, I drafted Colton Cowser, who was, great for me this year. But he didn't help you in batting average, right?
I didn't draft nearly enough steals. I mean, I finished dead last. Here's how embarrassing this was. I finished dead last in steals, and I had the AL stolen base champ on my roster. I have 120 steals on the season. Caballero was 40 something of those, and I had 120 steals on the season. And I'm looking back to the team like, what was I thinking? Losing Acuna didn't help, but I mean that would have put me to 160 steals.
The other issue for me in this league was my first, really, I had a lot of disappointing pitchers. My closing situation was great, right? I got Emmanuel Clase in the 4th round, was able to get Robert Suarez in the 14th round. And so I was pretty well set on saves. I also picked up Jared Jones in the 25th or 26th round, which was a really, really nice boost. But the rest of my pitching, Zach Gallen wasn't bad, but he wasn't amazing this year. Zach Eflin was disappointing. Jordan Montgomery was atrocious. Eduardo Rodriguez missed a ton of time. Nestor Cortez was up and down. Michael Walker was pretty decent, but Chris Paddock ended up not being the sleeper that a lot of people thought he could be. Trevor Rogers ended up being, sent down to the minors by the end of the season. So I definitely struggled in pitching. And while I did well enough in strikeouts and wins and did great in saves, my ERA and whip, my whip, really, my ERA was fine, but my whip was pretty disappointing. So, 4th place, it's fine, nothing great, but not necessarily, I'm not throwing it, crumpling up the strategy and throwing it out. Just need to, I think for that team at least, I need to do just a better job of kind of making sure I've got a little bit more cohesive of a team. So, all right, that's gonna wrap us up for this episode. Jason, it's fantastic to get to talk to you again. We're going to be seeing each other in Arizona here in about a month, but we'll get a few more episodes in the off season, discuss a variety of different topics. Paul and I will be back this next week as well to kind of discuss probably some more of our teams, including our main event team, my auction championship teams, things like that. And then we're just going to be kind of churning away the off season, right? While a lot of other pods go dark, though more pods are recording in the off season than they used to. We will be recording at least weekly, probably a few times a week, all the way through the off season,
and of course live
holidays.
Of course, and live in November.
We're going to be live in Arizona, so I don't know for sure if we've actually nailed down what our time slot is going to be. But we will be live in Arizona. If you are coming to Arizona, make sure you come up and say hi and hang out with us and talk some baseball. And if you are still kind of on the fence, you're still kind of deciding, hey, maybe I should go to Arizona. Maybe I shouldn't come to Arizona. It is, it's not the cheapest thing in the world. So I understand not everybody can afford to go, but it is well worth the time and the money. You just learn so much. You have such a great time. It is one of my favorite weekends of the year, right up there with Tout Weekend and Labor Weekend. It's so relaxed and so much fun, and you learn so much. So definitely go over to Baseball HQ if you want to sign up and join us in Arizona.
Yep.
All right, Jason, right over here, you can reach on social media and plug anything you got going on.
So hit me in Blue Sky there, and then I have the accountability. I mentioned I went back and looked at all 60 of the bold predictions that I made hitting and pitching, and celebrated successes, looked at what was close but no cigar, like Lucas Erceg. I said he would lead the A's in saves. He didn't, but he had a damn fine year. And his ADP was in the 550s, and it's probably going to be somewhere in the 120s this year. If he's closing in Kansas City, skyrocket with that thing. So I went back and looked at those, and now I'm starting player caps. And James Anderson sent me the first 20 I got to work on for RotoWire. So tis the season. I love it because the numbers are stable. They don't have to change, and I can write about numbers that are solid, and they aren't changing a day after I write about them. So it is time to do that. And I've been floating an article idea. I want to do something about the impact of new managers. Like, we were worried about Stephen Vogt and Pat Murphy and Carlos. I'm drawing a blank on the Mets manager's last name. But we were worried about the impact of what new managers would look like, especially like a Milwaukee and Cleveland, where we had managers that like to run a lot. What happened? I've been trying to float around that idea, what I want to do there to see what the impact was, because Pat Murphy Murphy and Vogt had zero managerial experience, and they did pretty damn good this year.
They absolutely did. You can reach me on all social media platforms. Justin Mason FWFB. I'm not writing at Fantasy Pros during the off season, and I am yet to be decided on whether I'll be writing for them next year, but you can still read all my work that I will be writing in the off season over on Fangraphs. I'm going to be doing my Apology Tour series. I am going to be doing ranks. I'm going to be responsible for, I think, second and shortstop ranks. But I'm also going to be doing my full projections again, which will be available to the Patreon subscribers. I will be, projecting out every single player that starts this week as well for me. So lots of content that's going to be coming from me. Oh, of course, Friends Fantasy Benefits podcast still recording, and this podcast will still be recording in the off season. So I'll be giving you a crap ton of content all off season long. So definitely make sure you're following me on kind of all those places, and including social media. So for Jason and myself, thank you for listening. Have fantastic baseball off season.
Thanks, guys.